Guys, the reviews are in. SBA lenders are calling CorpSmart the best due diligence firm in the industry. CorpSmart is a one-stop shop for all of your due diligence needs, and in SBA lending, there's a lot. Searches, filings, vehicles, you name it. I remember I brought a deal in one time that involved an airplane. My credit guy looked at me and he said, "How are we going to go about perfecting a lien on an airplane?" I said, "I don't know, call CorpSmart." If you're not already outsourcing your due diligence, one, you're probably wasting a lot of precious hours that you could be using to go find more loans. And two, you could make a mistake, especially if you're lending across multiple states because every state is different. If you're looking to streamline and get more efficient this year, this is an easy layup. They can connect right into your LOS so you can order your searches with a click of a button and they'll appear right in their placeholder. To discuss your due diligence needs, visit the CorpSmart website at www.corp-smart.com and you can let them know I sent you. Hello and welcome back to the Art of SBA Lending podcast. I'm your host, Ray Drew. Today we're going to be diving deep on something that comes up pretty often around here, and that is culture. We all talk about how important culture is. We want a good culture, but here's the thing. No one's waking up every day saying, I want a bad culture. That's the point I want to make here today. It's not about good or bad culture. It's about defining what your culture actually is and finding the people that fit into that. For example, the movie Wolf of Wall Street showcases a culture that is cutthroat, competitive, puts their needs above clients, and some people like that, some people don't, of course. Now, the show The Office, on the other hand, that features some quirky characters that somehow come together to form a functioning team, and they like to celebrate together, prioritize team building, and like to play jokes. Now, each of those shows or movies have very different cultures, but they could be considered in either a positive or negative light to the employee, depending on who that employee is. So today, we're going to discuss how you define your culture beyond just good or bad, and what are the real-world practical things you can do to reinforce the cultures that you're trying to build? I read a book recently called How to Thrive in the Virtual Workplace by Robert Glazer, and he emphasizes that a company should define its culture by clearly articulating its core values and ensuring these values are embedded into the daily operations. I agree with that. Do you have core values? If not, step one is figuring that out. For the purpose of this episode, I created 3 core values myself. Number 1, always be improving. It's been said time and time again on this podcast. This business is about people and process. I would want to create an environment where the people are empowered to offer improvements to the process. And if those ideas are good, I'd want to see that they can quickly be implemented into the process. The words, "that's just how we do it," would be banned. Number 2, grow with us. I would like to foster a culture where every employee is growing as the company grows. If an employee were to leave, I would want them to have left in a better position than when they came, meaning they learned more skills, maybe they grew their leadership skills. And number 3, I'm going to steal a page from another book, Unreasonable Hospitality. And I'm going to say unreasonably high customer service. So there's my 3. That sounds good, right? My core values are all about growth and being the best. Now, here's the hard part. How do I embed those core values throughout the operations? This is where so many shops fall short. So many shops will say they offer white glove service and then stop there. Or they'll say, we have great work-life balance, yet their closers are working 50, 60 hours a week. You can't just talk the talk with culture. You've got to walk the walk. Let's stick with my example for a sec here. So always be improving. Do you have a process in place for providing feedback about potential process improvement? What are you doing to ensure every manager in your division is bought into this core value? Are you talking about this at every manager meeting? Have you sent your team t-shirts that say, that's just how we've always done it with a big X through it? What about my core value, grow with us? Are you sending your people to conferences? Are you allowing them to purchase Nagel and Coleman trainings? Are you letting them get the certifications? Are you investing in those personality tests like Myers-Briggs so that they can learn about themselves and understand how to best manage their team? Do you have a book club? Finally, unreasonably high customer service, something all shops want, but very few, if any, get right. And that's because they don't build it into their process. First of all, you've got to track it. That would mean getting feedback from every referral source and borrower that you come into contact with. A process would be needed for that. I would make sure that my CRM was set up to track and send birthday and anniversary cards. My shop would close, let's say, 100 7A standard loans a year. Maybe I, as the leader, could call each one of those customers in closing to thank them for their business. For a leader to take the time out of their day to talk to a borrower is so meaningful and costs nothing. That's 2 calls a week. All of these things are very basic, very impactful, and yet no one's doing it. And that's because most shops can't even get the basics right. I'm going to wrap up with my top 10 culture killers that shops should eliminate immediately. Number 1, not sending your employees to SBA training conferences when they ask to go. Number 2, making support staff work more than 40 hours a week on a regular basis without additional compensation. Number 3, hiring BDOs that cause fire drills, call every deal a rush deal, and steamroll through their teammates to get their deals done. Number 4, punishing people for making mistakes. If you do that, employees will hide mistakes. Instead, you want to create a culture that allows employees to own up to their mistakes and then use those mistakes to refine your process and make sure it doesn't happen again. Number 5, making decisions without the buy-in of team members that are impacted by that decision. Number 6, no communication about what's happening or where the department is headed. Number 7, micromanaging. If your people don't feel like they're trusted to do their job, their morale will take a big hit. Number 8, speaking negatively about brokers and borrowers on pipeline calls. Everyone's been guilty here. The broker's pushing too hard. The borrower's dragging their feet. They keep sending the wrong thing. Listen, I get it. I would challenge everyone to have more empathy here. We wouldn't have a business without brokers and borrowers. Number 9, referring to a deal as the BDO's deal. It's all our deal. Calling it the BDO's deal relinquishes the ownership from the rest of the team and glosses over whose deal this really is, the small business owners. And finally, a lack of recognition. The idea that an employee should just be happy that they have a job is laughable. Your people are your business, and the manager's job should be making sure they are happy, have what they need to do their job effectively, and help push them to reach their full potential. And with that, I will bring in our panel of Art of SBA contributors to further unpack this and break it all down. With me today, I have Brooke Miranda, President and CEO of SEDCO, Jeannie Yoder, SBA Regional Executive at United Community Bank, and Chris Hearn, who we all know, who has a big announcement that he is not ready to share yet. So welcome, panel. Brooke, I'm going to go to you first. You heard my list of culture killers. Did I miss any?
So one I would say is, being present in that, leaders will say there's an open door policy, but then is there really an open door policy and, allowing your employees to really vet and talk through things, especially in the way of virtual, everybody working virtually now. I mean, I've got kind of a hybrid where, if you're not having that regular communication, that can be really difficult. So really making sure, it really is an open door policy. And I would say the other thing would be, ensuring, avoiding not training people internally. So you mentioned the SBA training, which is really important, but, we've really honed in on cross training at SEDCO. Because if you're not cross-training your team, and when I started, I had one person that could do a 327, and literally almost everyone on our team, besides our salespeople, can do 327 actions. So just ensuring you're cross-training people, because then they become more valuable. So those would be a couple things that I would point out.
Awesome. Well, that's a good start there. Chris, what do you think the most pervasive thing that banks do that creates a negative culture is?
Well, I think, and this isn't unique to banks, but I think in business, I think a lot of decisions are made from a place of fear, and fear has a tendency to crush culture. It also tends to make it less about a family and diminishes any sense of higher purpose when decisions are made from fear. Specifically, I think sometimes banks, the folks at the top, as you said earlier, they don't walk the walk, they don't talk the talk, they feel like they're above it a little bit. And I think if you want to create a culture that people really appreciate in a more of a familial culture, then the leadership has to get involved and has to be accessible. As Brooke said, we spend more time with our work colleagues than we do with our real family, and so you need to do everything you can to have a enjoyable culture that everybody's a part of. It's inclusive and obviously focused on a common goal.
Yeah, right. And that gets a little harder now in the virtual workplace, which, we should probably talk about later in the show.
Right.
But let's keep moving here. So, Jeannie, did any of those 10 culture killers stand out to you, or do you have another one that you want to add?
Ray, you did a great job putting the 10 culture killers. Number 10 resonates with me, which is what you say, that finally a lack of recognition, because each person contributes a different quality and skill set to the team. And to understand and recognize what that is and see each person as what their value and unique skill set is extremely important. I know in some organizations, if they don't, let's say, for example, you may be a top performer, but not a performer in that particular industry type, they may not see your contribution as important. And I think at the end of the day, you really have to look at it on a granular scope and really understand that you are managing individuals, not just a team. It takes individuals to actually be a part of the team. At the end of the day, it's teamwork, but individual contribution is extremely important. And I don't think that should be discounted by no means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to kind of get into it just from a high level, Brooke, like with regards to the culture. What's important to you in terms of culture?
Being a CDC or a nonprofit, so it's a little unique, which is different. And one of the things that I really try to do, not just with my board of directors, but with the team, is full transparency. So, every quarter we go over our financials. And so there's an invested interest in our performance overall. And I think that has been a really big win for us as a company, because I think they all see, hey, if we're not doing this many loans or we're not generating this much income, this is the result. And so ensuring, that they, again, when I say full transparency, that's what I mean. Not being afraid to share the information with them. Now, there's some things some employees don't need to know about other employees. I mean, that's the HR piece, right? So there is some differences there, but, being a nonprofit, our financials are public. And so at the end of the day, sharing, hey, this is what we do. The other thing we've done financially, which, we all, if I was a millionaire, I would not be working. I'll be very clear about, or a multimillionaire. I don't know, a million would do it, but multimillionaire. But like
million doesn't go as far as it used to.
Yeah, exactly. We all want to make money, and like how do we level up? Being a CDC, we don't 504 lenders don't make what bankers do, don't make what SBA lenders do. So I can get into more details later, but there's a lot of things I've had to implement. Going, man, I know these banks could be calling my people, and what can I do to keep my team? And that was one thing that one of my board members brought up. He was like, Brooke, your team has been with you 6+ years, and I've been the president for 7. So, what are the things that I've had to do to kind of make sure I maintain our core team?
Yeah, and transparency is huge. To your point,
Brooke, I've known you for a long time. You would be bored out of your mind if you just retired. Come on.
Yeah, right. I know. You're right.
Yeah.
That's
no
fair.
one retires from this business. They become a broker. But anyway.
Right. I do. Exactly.
If you've been a fan of the show for a while, then you know one of my favorite companies to work with is Rapid Business Plans. Last year alone, their business plans helped facilitate over $600 million in government guaranteed lending. They're on track to beat that this year. More and more small business lenders and their borrowers are relying on Rapid to help with the business plan, projections, and assumptions, because their team goes the extra mile to ensure everything is done fast and done right. And that helps streamline the process. They're great at export business plans, by the way, which are critically important at protecting that 90% guarantee. Rapid also offers feasibility studies, which tells you if the project is, well, feasible. I would recommend these for any large startup loan because it protects you and it protects the borrower and helps you get more good deals done. Go to rapidbusinessplans.com to set up your Get Acquainted call today. Find out why so many top producing BDOs recommend Rapid to their small business borrowers. We're going to leave a link in the show notes just for our Art of SBA listeners. Now let's get back to the show.
Chris, you've been at this a while yourself. What have you learned through the years in terms of building culture?
Well, a lot of things, and unfortunately, we've been recognized. I did the math earlier. I think we've gotten like 9 best places to work since 2003 in my 2 companies that I've started and run in SBA, which and those are anonymous, and that's saying something. I really take a lot of pride. That might be the awards I'm most happy about. But some of the things I do, I feel like I set the tempo at my company, and that includes having a sense of urgency. And the reason we have a sense of urgency, which I think is really important to connect the dots, is I'm always talking about our higher purpose at the business. And in the case of SBA, the higher purpose is we have a sense of urgency because we're needed. And the higher purpose is obviously doing our part to move society forward through financing entrepreneurs, to creating prosperity. I always try to make sure that our team understands that's our North Star. What we do is really important. It's very impactful. There's not that many people that know what we know at SBA, but we make a profound difference in the lives of our borrowers, in the lives of their any of the folks that are in the industry that work with us, whether it's vendors or otherwise. Makes a profound difference in the families of those business owners. So I think it starts there. If you have a common goal, if you have this kind of a purpose that you're all behind, then I think it makes creating culture that is a positive culture, that's inclusive, that's fun. Yes, also works hard, but I think it just makes it so much easier when it's not just a job. And I'm not so sure a lot of people experience that.
Well, it's an excellent point because, when we talk about your purpose or your goal, a lot of people tie it to volume and numbers. But when you talk about the higher purpose, it motivates you to work so much harder than, doing $100 million and then knowing, you're starting at 0 on January 1. The why behind all of this is important. So, Jeannie, what's something you've seen work in terms of building a great place to work?
Ray, I think something we forgot on the top 10 is that we have to have leadership, a person who is actually at the top that we like. Have you ever worked for an institution where you feel like they do all the great things, the process in place, the products, everything, but maybe someone is leading the group that you just don't like and does not treat you fairly, or just is not that great role model? That's hard. That's really hard. So what I've seen work is really the person with the mindset of being subservient. And this is the person who builds other people up, recognizes their weaknesses, invests time to help them grow, develop, become their best version of themselves, not you, but of themselves. And at the end of the day, let them become their superstar and know that you were impactful and you were a mentor.
Well, that's interesting you say this, and this is going to go on a little tangent here, off script, brace yourselves. But as you say that, and me being a little bit newer in the leadership role, Chris and Brooke, you guys were nodding your heads. Now, I like that subservient leadership idea. To get to this point, I've almost had to do the opposite, and I'd love some advice here. I have to not do low value tasks. I have to manage my time just ruthlessly to be able to, get all this stuff done. Yet when you're then leading a team, you want to be there for them and, basically help them, but you're really busy. So how do you manage protecting your time versus being there for your team? Chris, I'll go to you with this.
Well, I think the first thing that pops in my head is I agree with you. The leader has to value their time correctly. We want people in business to do their highest value tasks, right? But if you're the leader, then I think everyone needs to know you're capable of doing what they're doing. And maybe even sometimes you do help them out and you roll up your sleeves and get in the trenches with them. But I think it's also explaining the why. You can't, as the leader, you can't be in all places at any given time. They've got to understand that you're trying to prioritize your time just like you want them to prioritize their time. But you have to be available for them. If something comes up, you really do want to be accessible, whether it's by text or phone or what have you. And I just think if you do that enough times, then I think it fosters an environment of trust and really furthers that collaboration, which is needed to be successful. And it all comes down, I guess, to what's the expression? Leading by doing. People seeing you, that nothing's beneath you. That's a different mindset. And again, back to what we said earlier, I'm not so sure that is shared by leadership at a lot of larger corporations or some banks. I'm a Midwesterner like Brookes is, and the worst thing you can say to one of us is that we're better than you, or someone's better than you. So this idea of no one's beneath you, I think that's really important. And I think your team needs to understand that that's how you feel about things. And then they'll feel it as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's all tying together. And there's a lot of different leadership styles and management styles. But like, Brooke, what you said with the open door policy, it kind of all goes into that as well. Like, do you have anything to add to that, or did Chris sort of nail it there?
I think Chris nailed it. I'd add just communication. He mentioned being available. If you're regularly communicating, even if you have to schedule it, even if it's 10, 15 minutes a week, setting that time aside where they know, they've got they're not going to ping you for every little thing because they've got that's something I would recommend for you, just setting up small, again, it doesn't have to be an hour-long meeting, 10, 15 minutes where you're just touching base with that person. And that shows them that they're valuable.
And Ray, I'd like to add integrity and accountability. I think those two are extremely important.
Integrity and accountability. Absolutely. All right. So I realize we may not have our core values readily available. So feel free to speak broadly on this, or, specific to if you do have one handy. But I want to hear basically some examples of a core value. And remember, it has to be specific. And then let's discuss some ways to sort of embed those values into our operations. So Chris, I'm going to start with you here. What's one of your core values? You mentioned urgency or acting with urgency earlier. Do you want to go more into detail with that one, or do you have another one you want to talk about?
Well, I think that one's really important. I think along with that, authenticity. I think that kind of encapsulates a lot of this. What you see is what you get. Don't be afraid to speak your mind. I think the one I'd focus on is, and you alluded to this earlier, Ray, is mistakes, right? I don't mind when people make mistakes. What I hate is repeatedly making mistakes. I'm fine if we make a mistake and we learn from it and we move on. If that means we have to change direction, so be it. I can remember one time, this is going back years, my head marketing person, when in the early days of pay-per-clicks and AdWords and all that sort of stuff, didn't put a limit on the daily spend. And we quickly spent thousands of dollars that day. And she was horrified and thought I was going to fire her. And it was a learning moment. And I just said, look, yeah, I'm not happy about it, but it is what it is. Now you're never going to make that mistake again, right? And she's like, oh God, no. So, sometimes mistakes have to happen for people to really get the message and change direction correctly. And, when people are fearful that they're going to be fired over mistake, then, as you said earlier, they tend to hide these things, and that's not healthy. And that's the opposite of being authentic. So I think that's one of the things I would focus on. Mistakes are fine. Just learn from them and don't do it again. You have to have, that's important in a learning culture.
Well, I actually worked for you, and I've probably told this story at least once, but it actually just came into my head because it was a mistake that I made when I was a young buck working for you, and the way you handled it couldn't have been better. I mean, I did the wrong thing, basically BS my way through a conversation with a broker that actually knew a thing or two, and, we discussed it. He actually left you a voicemail and we played it in your office together, and he ripped me a new one, the guy did, and rightfully so. But guess what? I never made that mistake again. And you weren't mad at me or yelling at me or anything like that. You just said it almost exactly like what you just said. So that was, that was great. So
right. I don't remember
you,
that, but I'm glad.
no, it's a
made an
testament to
impression. That's
exactly
good.
what you said. So, Brooke, what's one of your core values?
So we have 5. We have 4, and then we have a main one. So when we did core values a few years back, I brought everyone in. I had a bunch of words, and I had them all vote on their. I think I did top 3. So what are the top 3? And it was about Sedco. Like, what do you think our mission is? What? How do you feel? And so we kind of brought it down, and our core values were reliability, community, quality, and teamwork, and then with the heart of it being integrity. Given what we do, and being lenders on behalf of the SBA, that was the most important for us. So it all kind of, integrity is the big circle, and those other circles are kind of around that. Then we have information about why we see these things as community and reliability. I mean, we're involved in the community. Our team every week goes and delivers foods for Meals on Wheels. So, trying to do the other things besides just, doing SBA lending and the monotony of that sometimes. And to Chris's point about making a mistake, and, I'll say, oh, I was like, yeah, as I'm sitting here in my glass house, like, we make mistakes. And so, at the end of the day, and that's what's hard about SBA. You don't necessarily, there's some gray, especially in submissions. And so for us, we don't, when you're PLP, it's different. You submit it and call it a day. But for us, SBA can come back and say, oh, you're wrong here. And so I'll look at my team, like, how many times have I ever been like, we got a screen out on this, and it's like, there's I can usually see if, there's a reason why we submitted it this way. So again, that's where trust is built, when you're not, upset with people for, again, making a mistake. And you're right, you make the same one multiple times, and you're kind of like, okay, do we have a problem here? And that's when you have to address that, of course. And I would say nip quick. And I have that on kind of a list. Like, when you hire someone, and I don't want to say it's like having kids, but I sometimes feel like that. It's like, you can always get easier on people, but you can't get tougher. So if you start out kind of being like, not hard, but like, just like you said, you're starting, like, what you're going to tolerate, what you're not, kind of putting it out there. And then once you get to develop a relationship, you can kind of get a little bit lighter. But then, it's like, again, having kids, they'll go up to the line and be like, where's that line? And I'm going to put, so you have to be, I always say, nip quick. If there's something that isn't flowing, fix it right away, so then it doesn't become a problem later.
I picked some great people on this panel because you guys are, proven to be great leaders. You put a lot of thought into it. Brooke, like you said, like with integrity and reliability, or I think you said reliability, or yep. Do you go into this meeting and you guys talk about it? You do your powwow, you vote, and then you go back to work, or is there more work to be done after that? I'm trying to figure out how people can take a value like that and then embed it into their department, like on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I think, you're right. I mean, it's easy to go talk about it and then you go back to work, but do those things, are those being shown through the work you're doing, whatever that looks like, integrity. We've had deals where we're like, we know this is a 15% equity injection. We've got another CDC saying it's 10%. We're like, no, it's not. We know it's going to be 15. Do we go and say, oh, it's going to be 10 so we can submit it to SBA knowing they're going to, it's those kinds of things. You're seeing it in how we're working with our clients and our bankers and our borrowers. And so when you kind of see it play out in the different circumstances that we're in, what is our quality of work? What is our teamwork? Because we have to have it. We've got servicing, we've got front end, we got, underwriters. So there's a lot of movement. And so, you kind of see it displayed throughout. So it's hard to kind of say, oh, there's one tangible thing you do, but it's also a good time to revisit. Like, hey, do you feel like we're still on the same path of, these core values, and always revisit that to ensure that, yeah, your team is still laser focused. And this is, if it boils down to integrity, are we doing the right thing? Whether that's with our small business owners, on behalf of the SBA and our lenders.
Okay. Jeannie, I'm going to go to you now. What's one of your core values?
I think Brooke and Chris did a great job mentioning them, but I'd like to also talk about it's a core value. Of course, trust, integrity, accountability. But yeah, Brooke, to your point, I think the most important leaders examples in terms of values that we need to be able to have within us is being able to have difficult conversations. I know a lot of leaders and a lot of people just are afraid of having difficult conversations. Chris, to your point, you gave an example earlier of an employee that made a mistake. But what if the second time the employee made the same mistake? Would you be able to have that difficult conversation? I would be able to have that. And some people can't. So I think it's service, integrity, accountability. We have so many of the same type of values, but at the end of the day, being able to have those difficult conversations, being fair, being transparent. It's being all these things, but being able to deliver these things. You can
Yeah.
and said walk the walk, talk the talk. You always talk the talk, but are you actually leading by example? Because I tell you what, people see things. They may not tell you they see things, but they see things and they talk. We all know that. They all talk.
I actually just wrote that down before you said it, Jeannie. Lead by example. I think all of this stuff comes from the top down. You have to lead by example. And I think that's just so critical. And as a leader, I think you have to connect the dots because we throw out some of these words. They sound like platitudes unless you connect the dots. Why is reliability important? Here's the reason why. Why is authenticity important? Here's the reason why. Why do we want to be trustworthy, and why do we want to have a sense of urgency? All these types of things. I think the leader, it's incumbent on them to connect the dots for people, because again, it gets back to being transparent and leading by example. I think is really critical, and we all know far too many people at different organizations who do not walk the walk. And that can be heartbreaking for somebody who's really committed and trying to do their best job, and then they look above and see that they're not as committed as they are, and I think sometimes that's why people end up leaving companies.
The other thing too is backing up your employees when push comes to shove. I'll tell you, years ago, it's kind of it's a quick story, but we were working with a new banker. We've been calling on this banker, and finally she's going to give us a deal. And I'll tell you, this was right when I became president, and the excuses don't matter. 3 weeks later, our CFO had a stroke. No one knew how to do the financials. Like all these things just happened, right? And an appraisal got sent to the underwriter. I didn't look at it, sent it to the underwriter, wrote it up. There was a business acquisition piece in the appraisal submitted to SBA. Totally shouldn't have happened. Whose fault was it ultimately? I put it all on me, and so at the end of the day, it's like, it was my deal. If I didn't, you know what I mean? Like just taking responsibility and backing up your people when there's something that, you know what I mean? There's a question, being able to back up. And you could have even, people that even internally that, you got credit saying one thing and be like loan officer being like, yeah, we can do this. So being able to kind of referee that a little bit, but I would say, corporately being able to back up your folks to where they know that you've got, you've got their best interest at heart, and you'll take the heat if need be.
That was an interesting point that Chris made a minute ago about connecting the dots, because I want to connect the dots here on this episode, because we're talking about, culture, but let's talk about the why behind why we're talking about this. I mean, Jeannie, people are busy, and, this might feel like an extra thing to do for that division head who's already doing a million different things. Is this a priority? In other words, like, what are the benefits of prioritizing building a distinct culture?
Oh, extremely important, because as Chris mentioned, it all starts from the top down. If you don't have the person at the very top demonstrating that behavior, how are you going to set an example for the team? It's almost like, and I don't like to use the word soldiers, but at the end of the day, we have to, Brookes' point, we have to be able to support each other. We have to be there to defend each other. We have to be there at the end of the day to be let's look at it as a football's analogy, to be the quarterback, to get us that touchdown. It's just so important. And I tell people at the end of the day too, there's 24 hours in a day. If you can't prioritize within 24 hours, perhaps you need to look at changing your job.
Just to add on to that, Jeannie, I think it's funny, I'm putting together a presentation for this coming weekend for our annual employee retreat. And one of the multimedia things I put in there is this it's a famous Foo Fighters song, "The Best of You." And I think if people keep that in mind, are we getting the best of you? And that starts from the leadership on down. If the leadership is providing the best of themselves, it makes it so much easier for the folks underneath them to give the best of themselves. And, I wasn't planning on putting a rock song in the presentation, but you know what? It kind of fits. And I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind.
It's okay. It's soft rock.
Foo Fighters are soft rock, right? Wow. I'd hate to see what you'd consider rock.
Well,
Raised into death metal, I think. I don't know.
It's actually great that you keep referencing this retreat you're doing, because that ties into culture.
Sure.
Can you talk about what you're doing and why you're doing it?
Yeah, we're having a all team, all staff meeting. Some of these folks in the virtual world have not met each other, face to face. I think it's important to get them all together. It's important to share our common values, to connect the dots for everyone. We have a lot of spouses and plus ones that'll be in attendance who actually want to hear from us, which is critical. They need to understand why their spouse works as hard as they do, or what they do, and how it contributes to society. So I think it's I don't know that enough companies do this, and it certainly it's costly. I mean, I'll grant you that. But I think the benefits you get out of something like that, it just demonstrates again to your team that you really are committed to them. You really are committed to all of us getting better, whether it's learning new things or shifting our mindset about things. But I just think it's it's an investment in your team. That's why we do it. And I'll tell you one little funny thing. I'm originally from Illinois, and I've been a Bulls fan my whole life, and I love the intro that the Chicago Bulls come out. I'm sure a lot of people know that Alan Parsons song, and I've always wanted to do that intro for people. And so that's another thing that I'm doing, and because I'm going to recognize my team in this, and I'm just so excited. By the time this episode comes out, we will have already done it, but I'm excited to do this because, I'm recognizing them as an all-star team essentially. And to have that kind of background, that connectivity, that emotional connectivity, I'm real excited to do that. But, again, that's me thinking about this for weeks or months. Like, how can I really make them feel amazing? And I think, for those of them that know that, this is going to be a pretty cool experience, I think.
Well, and you're more of a creative too, to be able to think of these things. It's almost like you're marketing internally to a certain extent.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Jeannie, going back to you real quick I referenced virtual earlier, and that's just so much more challenging to do all this. I mean, you have to get in person once or twice a year, maybe in smaller groups, depending on the where everyone is. If there's groups in different pockets throughout the country, that could be something. But on a day-to-day basis, you're virtual. Do you have any tips for, helping build a culture in a remote setting?
Absolutely. Brooke, I think you nailed it earlier. You had mentioned weekly check-ins. I have been at an organization before where I don't think anyone checked in with me for 90 days.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's just crazy.
I hear that a lot from
It's
like
because
videos.
you're that good. It's because you're that good, right? I'm just kidding.
It also goes back, Brooke, to the same point. When I say check in, you may have a team meeting or something of that nature, but when you have everyone together, that's not the same to me as a check-in. And some people may say that's their version of a check-in, but when we talked about being granular earlier and really getting to know people on an individual basis, it's important to have in my opinion, a weekly check-in, 10 or 15 minutes, just to pick up doesn't necessarily need to say we're talking about production. It's just checking in. I'll give you a great example. I've got people right now in Western North Carolina. Could you imagine I didn't check in? That's devastating. So I just think, communication is extremely important. Weekly check-ins, pick up the phone, and don't do it via email or text. I know some people say, well, I talked to you today. You did? Excellent.
No, it's a great point. I'm going to bounce over to Chris, and then I'm going to go to Brooke to wrap things up. But, one of the things I want to kind of talk about, because it's like sort of your first impression, is the onboarding. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on how to onboard a new, probably virtual teammate in a company. What are some just high level tips to be thinking about?
Well, we have, we're almost exclusively virtual. I think we have people in 26 or 28 states at this point. I think it starts at the beginning. You need to introduce them to everyone, recognize them for who they are and what the strengths that they bring to the team. I think it's important that you spend time with them up front. To Jeannie's point about the check-in, I mean, I think it's important to be checking on that new person regularly at the beginning, for sure. But yeah, I just think it's. I've been in organizations where they're hiring new people and you don't even know about it. You don't even know who these people are. You bump into them one day in the hallway and like, oh wow, who are you and when did you start? It's bizarre. So I think it's incumbent on the leader to make sure that people know who's a new hire and what they're doing and why they were hired and how they fit in. And I always a lot of my weekly meetings with people on video, I tend to be a little jokey about things and tease people, but you only tease people who you love. So I think that's important to do things like that, and you really are just making them feel very welcome. I'd like to think none of us hire people that we don't want to be part of our team. We want to hire people who share our values and are welcome to our family. So you need to treat them that way.
When there's good teasing on the weekly calls, that's when you've got a good culture. That's kind of like
right.
You're going in the right direction at that point because you feel comfortable enough to be doing that. One of the things I do when I bring on a new BDO is very simple, very basic. Have them have business cards like, when they start, give them the resources they need kind of proactively instead of just saying, hey, where's this, where's that? Like just actually prioritizing and thinking all this stuff through, which is like, should be the bare minimum, but just so many people are falling short of it. Just have an onboarding plan. So I'm going to go to you, Brooke. By the way, I think this went much better than our last episode together. Do you have any, and that's on me. Do you have any parting words about fostering a distinct culture at your company?
Parting words. I'd say, I've talked a lot about these kinds of things, but, usually people are leaving, I think Jeannie brought this up. They're leaving their leadership, not necessarily their job. And I really try to, money is important. And a couple of things I've done is, trying to give people raises before they come in and have another job offer that needs more money, so when I look at someone, I'm like, man, I couldn't lose this person, and there's that conceptually speaking, like I need to do something now. And they're not even asking. And I think that's been really, really great. We've been, we've secreted about it. We've what's called Flex Day Friday now. And I know it sounds kind of funny, but it's not a day off. It's, hey, it's kind of like that day that when things have to get done. I said the first time I hear, and so I put those out there, but then I'm very direct about what the expectation is. So when we say Flex Day Friday, I'm like, however, if I hear from a banker that, well, you guys are closed on Friday, you will not have Flex Day Friday anymore. So it's kind of like that. Hey, this is the expectation, but I don't need you to be sitting at your desk 8 hours on Fridays. So those types of things to try to, for us, like I said, we're, CECs and employees at CECs don't make what bankers and SBA 7A lenders make. That's just the truth. So trying to, think about the ways that we can, make things better. I have an Italian dinner. I've been having it since I've been president at my house, and my team and now will be like, isn't that coming up? When is that? So like, there's opportunity where they all get together, we drink some wine and I cook for them. I literally cook an entire meal for them. And now they put in what they want, hey, are you gonna have mushrooms with that now? Like, it's like things like that. So when I think Chris said, it becomes a family, and it really does, because, you've got to have trust, and we all make mistakes. None of us are perfect. But I think if they know that, you're there for them and you're doing the best you can to ensure, their happiness, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that take care of a lot of the, monotonous and the, some of the stuff that is just daily tasks. And they're the ones kind of keeping it going and ensuring that you recognize that as a leader, I think is the most important, because it's not Brooke, this, it's my team, trying to give credit where credit's due. Like, it is the team that makes this whole thing go and whole thing, hopefully, be successful, which is what we've been working on.
Amazing. If I cooked for my team, we would probably have an increase in turnover, but I think that's awesome. It's no wonder why you guys are in leadership roles. I mean, you guys you're putting in thought about it. I mean, this is like a glimpse into actually what leaders are supposed to be doing. Not everyone's doing it. So I hope this episode provides a lot of value to everyone. Thank you guys all for joining and being with us today. That was great. Until next time, ta-ta. All right, that's it for this week's episode. If you want more SBA content, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter and check out our sister shows, SBA Today and The BDO Show. We'll leave a link in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode of the Art of SBA Lending. Ta-ta.